All right, everybody have a good day. Well, it is a very tough act to follow, absolutely. All right, one more round of applause for Rihanna Stanley. I'm 3 times your size, but you scared me with that heart rate. I was like, whoa. It is an honor to be here today. I am a little bit of a zombie. I was celebrating in Las Vegas, not my bachelor party. My mom said I have to tell everybody I'm still single, and if anybody finds my wife, she'll pay money. But I was out in Las Vegas for my grandmother's 97th birthday, which is today. And so I said, Grandma, I said, there is a man named Freelandheisen. She goes, isn't that a street, Cory? And I said, it is a wonderful street, but more than that, it is a mark of a living legacy of service that goes back generations, that is being honored and fulfilled and continued by a great congressman who extended me an invitation to speak at the 30th anniversary of a great event, which will be followed by the 45th anniversary of a great event. I am 45 years old, Grandma, and I feel that I should be there. And she gave me her blessing to get on a plane late last night and fly here to be here with you this morning. And I want you to know I am truly and deeply honored to be with you. To the Reverend clergy that is assembled here, there are friends of mine on this stage, or people I've met now for the first time. I've asked them to pray for the Congress of the United States of America, because Lord knows we need prayer down there. To have you all gathered here today is an extraordinary testimony, not to a man, but to a movement. Yes. We often forget that Martin Luther King was one person who spoke with humility and reminded people that there were thousands of folks who were a part of a larger movement. This was not a marching and a protesting and a working for black rights. King never spoke to that. He spoke to deeper, more universal principles that bind humanity together in an inseparable way. Indeed, what we often focus on in this country and in this culture are lines that divide us that are nowhere near as real or strong as substantive as the ties that bind us. Now, I have to say that I had an experience with my family, and my mother, who I left last night as well, that I want to tell you about that sort of speaks to this truth. There's this idea, Rabbi, you gave me such a great introduction. There's this the wonderful ideal that is an aspiration for a child to give his family, his parents, nachas, right? And to give them pride. And I called my mom and dad up back in 2011. My father was getting ill with Parkinson's disease. And I knew that this would be probably the last window in which we could do something extraordinary. And I said to my mom and dad, I want to take you on a trip. Your dream vacation, anywhere you want to go, let's do it. And to my surprise and my delight, my mom and dad said, without hesitation, we want to go to the Holy Land. We want to go to Israel. And I was excited, and I planned a trip. I called a buddy of mine who lives in New York, Upper West Side. I've known him for a long time, Upper East Side. And I said, man, could you help me plan this trip, this adventure? And it was an extraordinary trip. He actually left his family, came with us to be sort of help us on this trip, and it was extraordinary. But we landed there, and at the time I was mayor of the city of Newark. And as mayor, I would get warned by the FBI every once in a while that I had death threats against me. Congressman, I'm a senator now. I've gotten no death threats whatsoever. I guess as a mayor, you were important. As a senator, nobody wants to kill you. You're not that dangerous anymore. So I decided to leave my security detail at home in New Jersey. But my friend said, you know what, I'm going to get a couple former Israeli Special Forces guys to be your security, and they also are part-time tour guides as well. If anybody here knows Israel, it makes sense. And so I land on the first day. It was amazing. We go to the Wailing Wall and the city of Jerusalem, and I get to pray at one of the holiest sites on the planet Earth with my father. And I'll never forget, somebody took a picture of mine as his shaking hand touched that wall, and my hand upon his. And we stood there in the holy city of Jerusalem and prayed. And we came back, and my mom was standing with tears in her eyes. We all hugged and wept. It's one of the most precious memories I have of my father, who died 6 days before I was elected to the United States Senate by this great state. And that night I put my parents to bed in the King David Hotel, and I'm getting ready to go to bed. It's late, I'm tired. And these two very, very large men who looked nothing like my nice Jewish friend from the Upper East Side. These guys were intimidating, almost as much so as this young man right here. And they look at me and they go, "We will go for a ride." And I look at them and I'm kind of nervous. I don't want to insult my hosts, and I go, "We will go for a ride." And they throw me and my buddy in the back of this Jeep, and we drive off on the Israeli roads, and then we go off the roads into the desert. And now we're driving out into the desert, and I pull out my trusty BlackBerry, and I'm getting no signal. And now I'm starting to second guess the decision not to bring my security with me. And I'm thinking to myself, oh dear Lord, is this what they do to the Christian boys when they bring them over here? They take the Goyim out into the desert. And just as I'm starting to get nervous, and I'm nudging my friend, I'm saying, where are we going? It's late at night. We ascend onto a hill, and suddenly I get cell reception back, and I see the city of Jerusalem, their gorgeous city, and I see mountains in the background, and we stop, and they say, we just wanted to build a campfire and get to know you. And so I walk it out, and it's the most gorgeous view. I'm looking into the valley, and I ask my guides, I say, what am I looking at? They describe it, and then once suddenly they say, the mountains behind there, they say, that's Mount Nebo. And immediately I got chills, because I'm one of those people who does not believe that there are coincidences in God's universe, that there's purpose in everything. And whether that is a good understanding or not, I do believe your thought process. There's an old saying by a great writer. He said, that only which you have within can you see without. If you see no angels, it's because you harbor none. I find when I harbor a divine thinking, I see the angelic realities around me, especially in the eyes of others. And as I looked out and knew it was Mount Nebo, the coincidence that gave me chills was that I knew what the Parsha was for the week. Now the Jewish faith, they separate the Torah into sections, and every single week, whether you're a Jew in Morristown, or a Jew in Israel, or a Jew in Argentina, you're studying the same Parsha. And I have for about 20 years, Rabbi, been regularly, more or less, weekly studying Parsha with two of my friends that are rabbis. One I met in Oxford, named Shmuley Boteach. When I met at Yale named Shmuley Hecht, I fulfilled the Chinese blessing that you live to know two Shmuleys. And it has so enriched my life, this study. And I got chills because my Christian upbringing and my Jewish study suddenly came together to give me a knowledge of something as I looked out at this mountain, and I said, would you give me something? I asked for something that could only be asked for in the modern state of Israel. I said, would you please pull out your Torah, and would you please give me your iPad? And I said to these two men, and my friend as well, I said, that mountain is a profoundly important mountain in the American context, because there was a great American whose last speech used as a rhetorical device, a powerful metaphor, that mountain, Mount Nebo. Yeah. And I said, the man's name is Martin Luther King. And what I did then is I pulled out the iPad. For those of you who know your Old Testament, who know the Torah, you know that Mount Nebo is where Moses was allowed to ascend and see the Promised Land. And so imagine this, 4 men in the dead of night, in the still of the desert, in a nation thousands of miles from here. I pressed play when I pulled up the speech, and now you hear Martin Luther King's final oration. I have been to the mountaintop, and I have seen over. I may not get there with you, but we as a people will get to the Promised Land. And you know how he ends with those stirring words, my eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Those words hung in the still desert air as I saw my Israeli hosts so struck by those words. But then I said, I need you to open the Torah up, because this week's Torah portion has some profound words in it that are written at a site in Memphis, Tennessee, at a place called the Lorraine Motel. Because King gave that speech and then retired to the Lorraine Motel, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and was slain by an assassin's bullet. And if we were to go there right now and look at the monument before that balcony, you would see the words from this week's Torah portion. It was the words that Joseph's brothers spoke when they saw their brother approaching. And written on that stone at the site of Martin Luther King's assassination are the words, behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what becomes of his dream. Ladies and gentlemen, this dream was not a dream of comfort or convenience. It was not a dream of celebrity or popularity. It was uncomfortable. It was difficult. It was reviled. And it was not just about marching towards civil rights. King was immensely unpopular at the end of his life because he was standing up against poverty. He was immensely unpopular at the end of his life because he was standing up against war. King's dream called towards universal ideals that at that moment in the desert, hearing the words from the Torah, hearing the words from a man named King, that 4 men so different nationalities, different races, different religions, we were bound together as human beings in this wanting and yearning for peace and for justice. And I tell you right now, we disrespect and we disregard the dream if all this day is about is celebrating and remembering a version of King that is comfortable and convenient. Like my friend Cornel West says, it is the Santa Clausification. The Santa Clausification of a man that was so much more than that. Now let me tell you, I've been your senator now for 14 months. I am so new, I still have that new senator smell. Pastor was sitting next to me, he said, what is that? And I said, it has nothing to do with me getting off a plane, going straight here, and not showering, Pastor. That's that new Senate smell, Pastor. That's what that was. But I am already just frustrated that so many of us at times don't adhere to principles and ideals, but go to a far more shallow level of analysis. If I could, this is where I'm going to get myself in trouble, because some of y'all are filming this, but if I could violate the First Amendment right now, if you gave me leave to violate the First Amendment, I would make a rule right now that nobody in America could tell you what political party they belong to. Because I'm sick and tired of people making their calculations based upon the person that gives the message and not the substance of the message. And I quietly in my office all the time said, thank God for Jack Kemp, Republican. Because if it wasn't for his vision of empowerment zones, a lot of the development that you all see in Newark right now wouldn't necessarily be happening. I saw this USA Today article, Congressman, where years ago, where they used a policy. They said, they polled people, they said, this is a policy. It was kind of complicated policy, but they said this is a Democratic policy. And immediately, Congressman, 80% of Republicans said they were against the policy. Then they flipped it around. Same policy, and said it was a Republican policy, and then immediately 80% of Democrats were against it. You see, we have a problem that we often don't listen to each other. We don't seek to understand. We want to be heard so much. And we, by the way, we all know this, we are always right. You see, King had a different approach. It wasn't about slamming and condemnation, it was about love. And love is a more difficult way to go. When you lead with love, it is a more challenging way that demands sacrifice. Now what do I mean by that? Let me take a step back and get to some things where we are now. Here cometh the dreamer, let us slay him and see what becomes of his dreams. There is moral urgency in America now that many people have not taken the time because of the climate of our politics. Because depending on what station I turn on, Fox or MSNBC, I get not facts but infotainment that reflects my already preconceived notions of what's right or wrong. And so when real issues come forward, we as a people don't even talk to each other. Don't get down to the loving that is necessary to solve the problem in the first place. Now, as mayor, I tried to cut through all that by telling my friends and my staff members this saying. I said it all the time. I said, in God we trust. Amen. But everybody else bring me data. I want to see the numbers. If you are not a deity, show me the numbers. Don't come in here and tell me, oh, this great program, so show me the numbers. And I found that when I focused on the data, the philosophy seemed to fall aside. And so now here we are at this distraught present. And I say that very purposefully. We are in a distraught present. And I'll explain that in a minute, but let me just say this. When I analyze data, and I have conversations with people down in Washington on the right and the left. When you sent me down there, you did not send me to be the Democratic senator from New Jersey. You sent me down there to be your senator for everyone, to try to solve problems and get things done. So I've worked hard to have dinners, lunches, meetings with everybody on the other side of the aisle because I want them to know my heart and my spirit, and more importantly, I want to know theirs. And I have found friends and allies that would surprise you, who I'll tell you about in a second. But this is what I mean by distraught present. I ran a police department, and I have found few people in my life that surpassed the courage, self-sacrifice, and love of police officers in New Jersey. I have seen them do things that are irrational on a consistent, almost daily basis. I still remember I was on the phone with Gary McCarthy, my former police director, who's now the police director for the second largest police department in America, the Chicago Police Department, battling issues and crimes and violence. It's unacceptable, but unnoticed. Not completely, but I do know when children died in Newtown, the tragedy, the pain, and the agony, and I wept watching my TV. But very few people in this room, if I asked you to name who the names of Natalie Holloway were or Jean-Benet Ramsey, we would know that, but we can't name one kid in inner city Chicago, Camden, Newark, that passed away.
That's right.
Now, Gary and I were on the phone one day because our police officers were outside of a building where there was a hostage situation, and we were discussing how we were going to handle this, and I'm leaning into the conversation. He and I are talking. There's a shooter inside. They have their family members held hostage, and before we can make some grand decision from on high, gunshots start ringing out. I hear them on the phone, pop, pop, and I tell you, all of a sudden I hear in the background, I'm not saying anything, he's not saying, I hear go, go, go. These police officers, when the shooting started, they ran into the building. I don't know about you, but if somebody in here started shooting, y'all would run out of the building. So let me just say this factually. We live in a state who every single day there are acts of heroism going on by our police officers. And if anybody here was in trouble, the first person you call, you wouldn't be like, let me call Congressman Freeland, I'm in trouble. No. You would call 911. Now, I say that to say this needs to be a part of the conversation. But I also want to tell you another fact, because data does not lie. In America, black and white people get arrested every day. Just in case any of you all don't have that illusion, folk are doing dumb things, illegal things, all the time. But let's look at the data. For every African American arrested in this country, there are 2.5 white people arrested in this country. In other words, about 2.5 times more arrests happen, engagements with the police are happening in the white community with white folks than black folks. But if you read the recent study by ProPublica, African Americans will get shot by a police officer 21 more times than someone that's white. Now this should be discussed in a way that has nothing to do with, I'm black, I have this opinion, you're white, you have this. This should be discussed as we are Americans, and we have an issue here. And when my friend and colleague, Rand Paul, I told you I'm going to be talking about people that I'm partnering with down there, writes that truth in Time magazine and calls to America's conscience and moral imagination and says we are better than this, we all should stand up and say this belies the truth that we tell each other when we swear and pledge allegiance to that flag and say liberty and justice for all. But let me continue with the data. This country of liberty and freedom is singular in the course of human history in a way none of us should want our country to be singular in the course of human history. We are better than any other nation on the globe, any other nation, in incarcerating our own people. We are 5% of the globe's population. That's it. That's it. But we have 25% of the globe's imprisoned people. Now, if that's your idea of America, fine. But I've actually done an independent study that I have yet to find one person, Republican, Democrat, black, white, Latino, Asian, that thinks that's okay. In fact, most people will say we should be number one, not in incarceration, but in education. We should be number one. In locking up people's bodies, but in liberating children's minds. Yes. And so that should alone tell you we live in a distraught present, especially when I tell you this shocking part of it, that over 70% of those people we arrest are nonviolent drug offenders. Nonviolent offenders, excuse me. Think about this. We here, when we drive around and we see these potholes, not on any of the two cities represented here. No potholes. But in other cities and towns. We all are spending $250 billion locking up every year nonviolent. No other countries do. China doesn't put this saddle on their taxpayers. Russia doesn't put this saddle on their taxpayers. France doesn't do it. Germany doesn't do it. I don't know about those Canadians. I'm a little suspect of them up there. But no other country, to my knowledge, is doing anything like that. But we're bearing that collective burden. But let me go a step further. Now when you start looking at the data along racial lines, it becomes even more disturbing. There is no difference in this country in the usage of drugs between blacks and whites. None. Let me make a confession. There's a lot of collars up here. I may or may not have seen marijuana used when I was in college. I can neither confirm or deny whether or not I witnessed such illegal acts in college. I am your senator. Please afford me that respect. Yes, oregano. I don't know where you went to college, Rabbi. New Jersey Culinary Art Institute. Nobody was raiding fraternities at Stanford. But in this country, African Americans who use marijuana and whites who use marijuana, a black person will be arrested about 4 times more than somebody that's white. Yes. The last 3 presidents admitted to smoking marijuana. One of them did not inhale. I'm sorry. You will never invite me back again. I need to give honor to you, who are extraordinary human beings. I apologize. I'm having too much fun up here. Let me bring this together. What does this mean when you over-incarcerate? African Americans will get about 10% longer sentences for the same crimes, 20% more likely to get the mandatory minimum. I can go on and on and on. Remember, our criminal justice system has moved away from trials. 95% of felony convictions now are done by plea bargain. And that gives a lot of prosecutorial discretion to very hard-working people. So now you're that 17-year-old kid, not the one at Stanford or Yale going on to build the corporate law firms or what have you, but the one in Camden, Patterson, Passaic. You get caught 17 years old for doing what your peers are doing. But the problem is your interaction with the justice system has dramatically different consequences. Let me just tell you what I participated in as mayor. You get caught with that bag of marijuana that I may or may not have seen at Stanford. It weighs a certain amount, so it's not just possession, it's possession with intent to sell. Most of our cities in New Jersey, every inch of ground, almost, is a school zone. So now your mandatory minimums are 5 years. You go for that plea bargain, that prosecutor's going to cut you a break because most prosecutors in New Jersey do. But you're probably still often going to end up with a felony conviction. You may not even get time. The collateral consequences for that have created in America a caste system. Remember, our federal prison population has gone up 800%. The 30 years you've had this dinner, this breakfast, the 30 years you all had this, the federal prison population over that 30 years has increased 800%. And so that child now, who's got a felony conviction, can't get a Pell Grant, can't get many business licenses in New Jersey, start a business, be an entrepreneur, can't get, somebody yelled out vote, we have a massive problem with felony disenfranchisement, can't get public housing, can't get food stamps. They're basically locked now in a world where they have very few options. Fast food restaurants in the city that I was the mayor of wouldn't hire you with a drug charge. And so what does that child end up doing? They get stuck in this underground world. What's the data say? If you're a murder victim in Newark, according to Rutgers, you're the victim. You have an 84% chance that you've been arrested before, an average of 10 times. So what we were finding out in Newark when I was mayor is that the end of this system is death or long imprisonment. So a system we have that is singular in human history, that costs taxpayers money, that when a person gets caught up into this, we strip away from them their economic viability for them to contribute to the whole. You all cannot have a football game where you get half of your players and keep them on the sideline because they have felony convictions or because we're not doing a good enough job creating pipelines for women and minorities to contribute fully. Then you have this distraught present, which we have in America, which I mentioned earlier, which is this. We have more African Americans. We've been through slavery, got rid of that. Jim Crow, celebrating Martin Luther King, but it was replaced around the time of my birth with the drug war. And guess what's happened for African Americans? We've come full circle. There are now more blacks under criminal supervision in America than all the slaves in 1850. And so I stand here to tell you now that there is an urgency in our country. Behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what becomes of the dream. And if we are to think that this is about hoping someone does something about this, we have forgotten the essence of King's message. Those 10 two-letter words, if it is to be, it is up to me. What Frederick Douglass says, in this world you don't get everything you pay for, but we must pay for everything that we get. Or King, who said so eloquently, change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, it must be carried in on the backs of people that stand up and work and sacrifice for it. I want to give you a message this morning that is not about adulation and celebration, but about urgency. That we get onto the field as King did, because the movement was great not because of him. It was foot soldiers, blacks and whites, Christians and Jews, who were marching, who were doing freedom rides, who were doing voter registrations in their towns and their communities, giving a sacrifice forward. And I want to end with this, self-indictment. This one story of self-indictment, and then I am done. We are so busy. We've got kids. I don't, my mom's upset with me. We have families, we have duties, we have obligations. But when my mom took me to Washington to swear me in, she wanted to prod me with this message. Please never forget, Cory, the title does not make the man has to make the title. And so, this is the story I leave you with, of self-indictment. When I was running for mayor in 2006, I was living in these high-rises. I lived there for about 8 years, a place called Brick Towers. And some folk here know about Brick Towers. And I had lived there, and it was such a great community, just in struggle. Leaders that taught me more than any professor I've ever had. And I watched kids grow up there, and one time, a while before the election, in 2006, I would go into the lobby, and there'd be young men hanging out there. That's where they hung out at night. Sometimes I'd bring them home food, we'd sit and chat and talk, and then suddenly I started seeing some gang symbols up, and then one time I passed through the lobby, and I smelled something I had may or may not have smelled at Stanford University. And I said, okay, I got to get more involved. And so I started taking the kids out to the movies. I still remember I asked them, what do you want to see in the movies? And I thought it was like some kind of like construction movie. And I went to see it with them. It was a movie called Saw. And but we started doing things together. We went out to a diner, and a friend of mine who was involved in drug dealing when he was young and broke out and turned his life around. I had him come. But suddenly it was the mayor election time, and I got really busy. I was running for mayor. I got too busy to follow up and continue with any kind of mentoring with these kids. I was running for mayor. I'd come home late at night, tired from the campaign trail. The kids would mock clap when I walked in. One day I walked through, and they all had lawn signs. They were waving, and I just got on the elevator door. I said, like, wait a minute, where did they get those lawn signs from? But they, you know the things are expensive. They teased me. One of them, I still remember, charismatic young man, always would make me feel good. I was too busy to follow through on a lot of things we had talked about, but they were just always there for me and my spirit. I became mayor, and then those death threats I told you about started, so I started coming home with security. I was mayor-elect, but I had guys with weapons coming. And so I don't know about what you did when you were teenagers, but you didn't want to hang out with the police hung out. So they stopped hanging out in the lobby. I didn't see them in a while. It was 1 month into my mayoralty, the summer of 2006. There was a lot of violence in our city, and I was going to every street corner And I would stand where there was a shooting, and I would talk to the residents gathered outside their homes that we are better than this. It's not a reflection. We will stop this. I would give great speeches on street corners and working with my police, putting plans in. I was so important. And I was running around the whole city, and then 1 month into my office, I get called for Court Street in Newark. There was a shooting close to our downtown. I rushed down there, and just as I thought, there was tons of people out in the streets. There was a body covered. I could only see some dreadlocks hanging out. Another one being loaded into an ambulance. And I turned around and I gave some of my most impassioned discussions with residents. This is not who we are. We are going to rise above this violence. And then I go home and I'm charged up. I'm important. I'm the mayor of New Jersey's largest city. I sit down and pull out my BlackBerry and I start cycling through, reading the police reports of the day, and then the police report of that shooting, and then I see the name of the victim. The young boy in the lobby. So reminded me of my dad, of charisma, of handsome, smart, who God put right in front of me every day, was now one of my statistics, was now my data, was now a bloodstain on a sidewalk. Went to his funeral and to his wake, and I'll never forget it. I had no speech in me. I stood in the back and I watched as people came in. It was packed. Everybody was there. Brick Towers turned out, the high school turned out, there were community leaders, politicians, there were all kind of active, packed wall to wall, and I didn't feel like the mayor. I felt like a child being choked by darkness, and I couldn't do it. I told my aide, I need to leave. And I left that ceremony, got into this fancy SUV and drove to the mayor's office in Newark, charged past my assistants, didn't say anything, slammed this big heavy door to this palatial office. I locked the door and I sat on that couch and I cried. Every day God put him right in front of my face. And we were all there for him at his funeral. But we were not there for him for his life. So, ladies and gentlemen, this morning, this sacred day, this day of peace and strength, which we hail one of our fallen leaders, I say those words, behold, there is the dreamer. They slayed him. What has become of his dream? Who will carry on that light and that truth, not with spoken word? Who will carry on that work and that struggle, not on TV screens? Who will do the true work of making our nation live up to its highest ideals? Who will swear an oath every single day with their life? I will live the dream. I will bring the truth. I will be the light. Who will do that? I end with the call of another great warrior from the 60s. A man whose poetry called to the consciousness of this country, challenged us to expand our moral imagination. He simply wrote, "Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, but yet must be, the land where everyone is free. The poor man, the Indian, the Negro, me." Who made America? Whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must make our mighty dream live again. Oh yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me. But I swear this oath, we must swear this oath, America will be. Thank you.